people? Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. This is Ian here, coming at you for a review of Legion Season 2, Episode 1. Now, this is a series that we had a chance to talk a bit about in our previous shows. We didn't have a separate review column for it, but figured this season more than warranted it. Couldn't get Chris on board with this one. All's fair. He couldn't get me on board for Walking Dead, so what can I say? I had a chance to check out this episode, but you might notice this is coming up a little late. You can blame me for that primarily. I'm just recently getting back in town here from PAX East in Boston. It was an awesome con, probably my favorite one yet. But I will leave that review and more on that for our show. Looking at Legion here, now I was really excited to get back into this show, to get back into watching it. This is a real acid trip in more ways than one. And it's hard to pin down what's the thing that really attracted me. If there was any one thing, what I really love about the series, I think I saw a lot of shades of Inception, one of my favorite movies of all time. In the original, it's something that's fun to follow, and its guessing game that keeps you thinking, and sort of the whodunit of the series is really persistent. I love how that can shift almost scene to scene. You might be perceiving something one way visually, or even thinking you're following a certain point in the narrative, but all that could get turned on its head in an instant. And this is certainly, so far at least, early on, this is definitely a season that's going to be doing the same thing. Now, one thing I am liking a little more about this before I jump into the review is the narrative form we have here. Things are a little more direct. We're a little bit more bullet line through the main plot, pursuing where we're going with this, and it's a good, solid direction that you know is being casted. I kind of felt we were wandering in the woods in the original season. So just so you know, as I hinted, I am going to go into some spoilerish material. If you haven't already seen it, or if you just want to wait for that, you still don't want to see anything, you're going to wait and you're going to binge watch this, whatever it is, just letting you know early. Otherwise, stick right here. Stay tuned, because we're going to jump right into this thing. So, the end of Season 1 had David captured in a Pokeball. At least that's the best thing I could discern it was. He pretty much got taken by this object, and there we go. We ended. So, we pretty much pick right back up at that point, especially once we drop back in on David's narrative. From his perspective and where he's been. And there's been some changes to the world as well while he's been gone now. So for David, just a day has passed. For him, he's just seen everyone yesterday. All these events just happened. In reality, especially according to Sid, about a year has passed. Close to a year, about 362 days. So there's a mystery up front in and of itself. What would bend his perception of time? What would change? Everyone's questioning, what does he actually remember? Can he remember anything from what he dealt with? And unfortunately, he can't. Or just bits and pieces, rather. He only remembers fragments. Nature, trees, a dance club. The typical randomness you'd expect from this series by this point. So a little bit of more review about this world goes by. The David's team, they have now joined up with Division 3, and it turns out that this organization has multiple branches. Now, the branch they're part of is sort of the head of the spear. They're involved with direct investigations, on-foot operations for mutant activity. There's two other branches in this group. There's another dedicated wholly to research that Carrie helps carry out, and also there's a branch for tactical and combat, things like that. So, but in any case, the team thought it would be most beneficial to simply gather under this umbrella and really pool the resources against arguably what was going to be a common threat. Now, this team is led by, well, of all things, a fellow wearing a basket on his head, naming himself Admiral Fukuyama. And actually, I say himself, but that's points a little bit up for some debate. When he addresses anyone, he voices himself through these three robotic android translators. David refers to them as the women with mustaches, which is honestly what they look like. But what we do know, at least what hasn't been confirmed, Fukuyama is not necessarily a mutant. This idea, this guiding concept behind him is the machine that bleeds, that since youth he was part of this very twisted experiment merging mechanical elements with biological elements. So we have no idea what's actually under that basket, and or what type of consciousness he represents and things like that. But I'm sure we'll get more into him. But just a really, really odd figure in typical Legion style. A really, I think, neat way to sort of kick off the directing board here. And the interesting thing about all this is it really puts David's group under sort of an umbrella, under a hierarchy. We're in season one, we're very much led into this struggle with David's group constantly being on the run, being hunted down, and sort of having a feel of a rebellious organization. And instead, here it really feels as though everyone's united in one purpose, that the ideals have sort of merged into dealing with the Shadow King and getting rid of him or any other dangerous elements there might be around. Now, about the Shadow King, this is important. As you probably remember, Amal Farouk, aka Lenny, aka Shadow King, was purged out of David's mind at the end of season one, but now has Oliver as a host. So you have this really twisted trinity happening here, with Oliver being the main host, with Farouk himself, true identity, the true parasite, and then Lenny sort of stuck in this weird in between suspension. It's pretty wild. I mean, Farouk's managed to steal Lenny's face, identity whenever the way he chooses to reveal himself and things like that. But Lenny, if you remember back to the right beginning episode of season one, there's really nowhere for Lenny to go right now. I mean, Lenny's still part of a wall, very, very dead. So this is really the only place her consciousness actually exists right now, and I think that's going to be an interesting, important point going ahead that we're probably going to be looking at in future episodes that we see too. Another important element that's changed about the world here, there's a brand new pandemic called the Catalyst, at least that's what Sid calls it. Instead of a virus like a flu or a cold or something contagious you pick up, it seems, if anything, like a psychological mass sickness. If anything, it's rendered many, many, many people, we don't know the exact number, but droves of people into mindless, teeth chattering drones. It's kind of creepy, to be honest, that they're really storing the people infected by whatever this psychological issue is in these large containment rooms. It's just a series of people all standing upright, just with a really creepy head tilt, just chattering their teeth. Really, really haunting, really spooky imagery here too. But again, more more cool direction by this show. Got that right here. Also, we've got some other elements that reveal themselves during this search and during this hunt. We're quickly brought into this race. It's found out that Farouk, Shadow King, is trying to get his body back. The idea if he does that, we will be able to take his psychic powers to an entirely different level and likely be unstoppable. And of course, David and his team want to stop this before it happens. So they are tasked with tracking Farouk down as quick as they can and putting it into this. Now, I'm trying to see if this was an X-Men callback, because it really, really seems like it is. David gets a hold of a device that really reminds me of Xavier's Cerebro in this episode. It's an amplification device that Carrie ends up helping with to sort of expand his field of awareness, that he'll be able to search farther to try to make a really easy pin mark location to locate the Shadow King right away. He uses this and it does expand his consciousness, but of course, with how powerful he is, he not only has to be careful with using this, he ends up transporting his whole self out of the unit and ends up somewhere completely random in the facility later. But I think this is going to be a really important element, at least while we're around this area of the series, to see what it does. I'm sure we haven't seen all its full capabilities yet. Xavier himself in the X-Men series was able to pull some incredible feats. Cerebro just even looking around the world and being able to find one certain mine, things like that. So David isn't quite as direct in his search. He knows what he's looking for, but of course he's a little more aimless as a character in general. So even as as he's gotten a hold of his powers and understands how those function, there's like a lot of curveballs and a lot of odd directions. A lot of this stuff can take him. So once we're caught up with the world, the events that have happened, once David's sort of up to speed, the team wants to go back and do as much review as they can to try to figure out if they can restore his memory, if he can remember anything. Because if there's anything that's going to help them right now, it's David's memory, find out where he went, what he did, and hopefully giving them some clues to track the Shadow King from there. Turns out post Cerebro, I'm just going to call it Cerebro TM from here out. Post experiment, David's memory does start to return, and we get a view from his perspective of exactly what he saw and what he dealt with. And it turns out that Sid was the one that put him in the Pokeball. Well, not the Sid that we know, but a Sid from the future. Oh, okay, here we go. Now, we've seen this in X-Men, Cable, Bishop, everything else, etc. When you get twisted timelines, I'm a little worried about what that implies, or how wild this could get as a series. Because, like I said earlier, on the one hand, here we are, we're finally with a very direct line, straight directions, plotting the course, and now we're involving time travel and things, which can get really dicey and really tricky. But in any case, when we delve back into David's memory, the Sid he encounters, the future Sid, she's aged, she's older, she's also missing an arm, and at least in the space she's in, she doesn't seem to be able to speak. Or I'm not sure if that's due to the tech she was using to reach out to him and contact him, the future, reaching back to the past, or whatever else. That's not explained. But David catches on quick. He follows her cues, and she's sort of drawing with this glow stick to give him some direct illustrations and examples what he has to do. And of all things, she asks him to help the Shadow King find his body. Now, this is counter to everything we've been dealing with up to this point, and throws David for a complete loop. The first thing I thought about it was my enemy of my enemy is my friend. But what enemy and why? There has to be some precedent for this. Before she can explain anything else, Sid is seemingly at least, pulled back into her own time. And as we get to see the rest of David's memory, what he remembers while he was trapped in the ball, he does have a really brief encounter with Farouk, with Oliver. I'm going to say Farouk / Lenny at this dance club scene. And it turns out, of course, they're still on the hunt for Farouk's body. If anything, the body itself, who it is, or at least what it is strongly hinted at a few times. It's almost like a monk type character, like a bald man that's weaving between crowds at various times. But he seems kind of ethereal. He sort of slips in and slips out, and they don't have an exact bead on where he is yet or how to pin him down, which is what they're trying to do, of course. So the one thing I liked about all of this tension is it sort of really put a cylinder of dread around the whole episode. There's this tension. Of course, we had it in our minds that the Shadow King Farouk had been dealt with in the original in season 1. That was sort of the one of the big finales. It didn't end the season, so to speak, but it was still a really, really important point. And now having him is still such a part, so involved in the series, really takes things for a different spin and really puts both teams at odds. And of course, seeing who's going to complete this race first and keep this guy from reaching his full power and his full potential. Visuals, the soundtrack, of course, right in form for what you'd expect for Legion. I do want to talk a little bit about audio first. I think the soundtrack itself is pretty sparse but brilliant where it fit. There's a transition near the end of the episode, and I really encourage you to watch for it. If you have either DVR, if you're watching this off of Amazon or whatever else, go check out the audio transition at the end of this episode that leads into the credit music, rock theme. It's just awesome. it sort of moves from a sort of old melodic style feel into like a distorted 8 or 16-bit sound, and then it moves into a rock theme. Whoever engineered that, that's awesome. And I really hope we hear more of that, or more things like that as we get deeper into the series. Visuals, really sick, really awesome. The use of vertical and horizontal space is really twisted here, especially in the scenes where we see Admiral Fukuyama. He's in this room. Like, you're looking dead ahead, and I mean, he's sitting like in a horizontal plane, but you look at him, and the close-ups make everything feel like we're looking at a vertical plane instead, or getting sucked way into the background. So, and the show teams with these kind of things. I think that's part of the fun of watching it. It's a visual treat. It's been more of an audio treat that I expected so far, and it's shaping up real solid. There's also some really cool uses of many tricks we've seen in cinema before, including sort of like the fisheye, or like the fishbowl style, to create a sort of bend around a hall chase scene that's actually done really well. Things like that. So it's you will never be bored with what you're looking at with this show. In fact, I encourage you not to take your eyes off it, because you might miss something. So, yeah, overall, I'm liking this. I'm gonna give this Kickoff an 8.5 out of 10. The only things that I'm, of course, docking for a little bit is the time travel thing. I'm worried about that, honestly. Just a few of the scene setups and the way we saw those, but this seems to be off to a really good start. I am definitely going to enjoy reviewing this one, and we're going to do episode 2 next. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate it. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Maybe you like this time travel idea. I don't know. Heck, who knows? Send it in. Give us an email, drop a comment, and of course, smash that like button if you could. Thank you, and have a good one. Hey people, thank you for tuning into this episode and taking a listen. If you like our content, if you like what you're listening to, or anything we go over, hey, please, we would not only love to hear more from you, but it's great if you could throw some support. You can subscribe right below. Also, you can toss us a line anytime. That's ksongmedia@gmail.com. Of course, you can tune in for our channel anytime for movie reviews, game reviews, a lot of random wacky stuff. Who knows what you'll hear. And of course, our episode each week where we're bringing the nerdiest things we can find, dig up, and maybe not find. Maybe the stuff that just drops in our laps. But anyway, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope to hear from you again later. Take care.